I'm Bethany.
And I'm Lauren.
Welcome to the Healing Collective podcast, where we explore the paradox of healing at the individual and the collective level.
Join us as we invite guests to share their personal paths to freedom.
Well, Jarrett, just like, who are you? How I know that you're friends with Lauren. You guys know each other, but just tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would.
Yeah, my name's Jarrett, and my wife and I in 2 weeks celebrate 25 years of marriage, which is insane. We got married so young, and we have 2 children. One is about to be a sophomore in high school. One's about to be an 8th grader, Elijah and Gigi. Bethany and I were just talking about our dogs. We also have 2 dogs. One we like, the other one we put up with. Moses is the one we like. Louis is the one that is, if he weren't cute, he would be in trouble. So he is just too stinking cute and very evil. I've known Lauren for many years now. We've been in a couple groups together and been learning partners together, breakfast buddies together. Have walked with each other through several different seasons of life. And this fall will be 11 years ago, we opened doors to a church that my wife and I pastor here in downtown Chicago, in the West Loop neighborhood of Chicago. Lauren's been there. That's kind of what I bring into the world is the leadership of that. And I'm primarily responsible for the teaching, communicating that kind of stuff. So I do that through messages on the weekend and through various podcast things we do. And then I also have written some books, and that's kind of a way that I really seek to bring about transformation. That's really a big thing to me, is transformation. How can I help bring that about first in my life? And then how can I invite others into that process? And that's really what our whole church is about. It's probably the least religious church I've ever been to. And it's about transformation. It's about healing is a huge part of what we do. And we've gotten even, in the last 2 years, since the entire world has changed, we've taken it even more seriously and are supporting people in lots of really beautiful, and I think when people think of a church, probably unexpected ways, but to me, it makes all the sense in the world. So that's some of who I am and what I do. That's all I got on the bio. But yeah, anything else you want to know?
I'll add that so Bethany, they implicitly and explicitly bring consciousness into Christianity. And so that's a conversation that we've talked about for a long time. Bethany and I have as everyone has their church trauma from the past. I really, really trust Jarrett, and I really trust Jeannie, and I really trust what they're doing there.
Thanks, Lauren.
I feel comfortable there. I feel inspired when I see what you're posting. It's so aligned really to the work that Bethany and I are doing in the world. I just think she works kind of like, what does consciousness and liberation look like in food justice and environmental justice? And, I'm more in like racial justice and education justice. And it's like, you're just those same kind of paradigms and mindsets and beliefs, you're bringing them to kind of like church justice, Jesus justice. I don't know.
Someone needs to hashtag that quick, Lauren. Hashtag that quick.
Transformation and healing justice.
Yeah.
Jarrett, I heard you say the least religious church or something like that. Can you, my energy went up around that. And I think it has to do with like leftover judgments I have about some of my church experience, but I would love to just hear a little bit about what you mean by the least religious church.
Well, I think I will own right off the bat, I have the worst perspective in this entire organization. Like in this church, I am the most biased and I have the worst perspective because, it started in our kitchen. It started in our living room. I mean, it really, there's no way for me to have an unbiased view of it. But I would say,
well, we all have biases, right?
Of course. Oh, I'm just outing it right off the top.
Beautiful.
I'm sure someone probably already outed it before I did, but I'm out. I'm trying to own my part of it. I would say that it's just, I think because both my wife and I had various experiences with church, some healthy, some very unhealthy. And, when we set out to do this, do we really want to do this? Do we really want to bring another, thing like this into the world? And for us, it was, well, what if we could bring another kind of church into the world, and one that isn't, bogged down or locked up in traditions that don't have maybe any connection to people's lives? How can we bring back some traditions that people have lost and forgot, that really are powerful and rooting and centering? And how can we do this in a way that just, that if we're going to go all in like this, it needs to be the kind of church that we would want to go to. So those are all of our intentions. But I think what's been really fun is, as we were, I'll use a real churchy word, as we were faithful to doing that and doing the best we could to do that, the folks that were drawn to or have come and been a part of it, embody that. And I think for a lot of folks, we have a lot of folks who've come from some bad church experiences in the past, but the majority of our folks come from kind of like no church experience in their past. And so to try and expect them to play into some, role or some expectation of what it means to go to church or be a part of a church that they have no context for would be, it would just be foolish. So a lot of it is, we had these intentions, but it's the folks that have shown up and keep coming. And it's a young church. I think the average age, who knows what anything is anymore, as we're kind of in the midst of where we're at with COVID. But last time we did any kind of survey, average age is 28. So it's a young church, if that's young to you. So there's a lot of activism, and there's a lot of, push for justice. I think, again, worst seat in the house here, most biased person, a very diverse church. And so, for us not to not only speak into cultural moments, racial reckoning, what does all of that look like? For us to not speak into that would be an injustice to them. And so it's really pushed Jeannie and I to do our own homework and to do our own work. And I think what comes out of that then is this beautiful sort of alchemy of our hopes and expectations and desires for a place like this. And then these people coming and helping shape it and make it even more than we could have imagined. And then we also got a ton of folks who grew up in church and, come here, we can tell when they call my wife the first lady, or when they, they assume that she's just, like the pastor's wife versus Lauren knows she's actually the one that runs all of this.
They co-pastor that.
We co-lead it.
Pretty,
it's pretty lots of things. It's pretty awesome and pretty challenging. But we can kind of tell when people show up expecting that sort of religious experience, and they usually last about a week. So.
Interesting. I have like so many things that are coming up for me, but I'm at a conference right now, and I gave a talk this week on conscious activism because I'm a type 8 on the Enneagram, and I care a lot about justice, and I'm very motivated, and I launch into a lot of action when I
His wife is an 8. He's very familiar.
I'm married to an 8, so I've had some history. I have some 8 trauma. I have some 8 trauma that I'm working through. Yeah.
I'm working through my own 8 trauma. So I have this story that there's this traditional or even current way of doing change, and even activism, even environmental activism. So I gave this talk this week, which I was supposed to be telling everybody how to do conscious activism. And I was like, I don't know how to do conscious activism.
That was her whole talk.
It's not here yet.
Does anyone here know how to do it?
Yeah. It's just I don't think it's here yet as a collective experience. And I think we have all these great practices that we're doing, and it's really fruitful. I mean, major stuff has shifted in my life, in my sphere, and on these smaller scale things. And when I open myself to the heartbreak that I have around a dying planet and species, and the idea of that, I don't yet have the capacity built to actually feel how I feel about that and feel my feelings through all the way. And so I've been on this mission personally to expand my capacity and change my relationship, because I come from this school of thought, both in the church and in activism, where it's there's right and wrong, and there's a problem here, and you need to do it differently. And someone knows how to do it and someone doesn't. Someone's the bad guy and someone's the good guy. And these really super binary models of how we just interpret the world and decide how we're going to show up and what we want and what kind of energy drives our actions. And I didn't realize, until recently, kind of doing some of my own practices and work around this stuff, that I learned that binary, good, bad, right, wrong model, and built the deep fear, like the full body, like actual fear and reactivity around what's right and what's wrong, and are we going to get it right in the church, in my church experience.
I'm shocked to hear that. Yeah, I think you're the first person to ever experience that, but go on. I'm trying to understand.
And I know that there's this entire group of people that call themselves post-Christian, and I've been paying attention to that movement a little bit, and I get the no, this doesn't work. Yeah. Like, I don't want this. I really get the anger and the boundary of like, no.
Understandably.
It's more nuanced and more complex than that. And I've been rolling in a lot of the strategies and parts, and even just physical chemicals that got built up in my body, being basically scared of going to hell.
Yeah. Scared, literally scared to hell. Like scared of
Truly
hell, scared to
not
hell.
Just death,
had the hell scared out of you.
Eternal, eternal pain and suffering. Yeah. Around like, oh shit, like I want to have sex with somebody.
I keep waiting. What's the question you're going to ask?
It's all built up here. And I'm also feeling like this was more than you had for your talk right now. So I'm feeling like you're getting all that energy out here.
Yeah. I'm like high on all kinds of shit over here. So you guys can just know that about me today. But I heard Lauren say that you're building a whole model and a whole church experience around, and that you're really focused on justice, and that you're building it around more nuance and some conscious practices, and some of the same things that Lauren and I are basing our stuff out of, which is just super alive for me. So I was wondering if you could say something about the old model around justice, and, how you would approach change in the world, or even being a church and like standing for something, whatever it is that you're standing for in your church community, and like the old model and what model you're offering, and what you think are the deltas and the differences between those two things.
All right. So there was no question for 5 minutes, and then there were 7 questions there at the end.
Get used to it, babe. That's how we do it here.
Let's start here.
I have some thoughts though. Yeah, go ahead.
I would love, Jarrett, just to like how you've seen your church transition and where you're going, or, and let's just start there.
Yeah. Cause I do, Bethany, I do want to come back, because I've thought about what you talked about a lot, and have not only thought about it, have kicked it around, and that's what we're kind of up to, is we're not trying to invent something new. I think what we're trying to do is bring something back to something true, not right, not wrong, but true. Beautiful. And so, Lauren, when you ask, what is it that say the question, Lauren, like, what is it that we're trying to, like, or is it around
she was bringing you to like a delta, a before and after. And I just thought we could just start with, just before we get to the delta part, just like, where are you headed as a church, and how have you evolved?
Yeah, I think, when we started as a church, I mean, look, the truth is, like, when you're starting something from scratch, you need a few people to kind of be on board. And so in the beginning, I think, whether we realized it or not, we needed some people that knew about church. We needed some church people to help us get a church going, and so, like, if you were to start a shoe company, you need some runners or some athletes, some people go like, this actually works, this doesn't. And so we definitely had, and still have, a great group of people who kind of have come out of some of what you were talking about there, Bethany, different versions of what is very common amongst churches, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. So, but as this thing has evolved and transformed, and I think and as Jean and I have, I mean, honestly, like, as we have, as humans and as people and as parents and as partners and then also as pastors, I think what we're trying to do here, especially in terms of the part that justice has to play, is we're not trying to, I don't have a lot of energy for reacting against old things. I just think I get real exhausted of that real quick. Like, we're not this and we're not going to do it that way. That to me feels like you're huffing fumes at that point. And so what we're trying to do is bring back to what I think is, core and essential to a gospel. I'll use that word, it's a very churchy word, but the way of Jesus. I think you cannot look at, and I don't, wherever anyone listening is at faith spectrum sort of wise, if you were to just study the person of Jesus, regardless of what you believe about the claims about him, you cannot avoid his disproportionate preference towards those who were pushed aside, those who were intentionally, systemically oppressed, those who were poor, those who were marginalized. You cannot read it otherwise. I remember when I was kind of early on in church work, there's a church that we were working at, a very, very big, very, very successful church, for all whatever that means. And the pastor really was more of a CEO. And I remember him telling me once when I was in my early 20s, because anytime any leader tells you something in your early 20s, you immediately assume they're wrong. And I remember him saying, Jesus and his followers, they were more like businessmen, they were about to, they're about to start this business for global expansion. I just remember hearing that going, okay, what? I don't know. That's not right. Like, look at who they are. They are a disparate band of people. There's no reason any of them should have gotten along together. They all came from these different backgrounds, and they were rallied around this person, and I believe around this way that is for lack of a better word, the underdog, the outcast, the overlooked, the whatever category you want to put it. So it is impossible for me to even just study, let alone attempt to follow or to model or to help others towards living a life more like Jesus without it being integrated with the poor, the oppressed, the marginalized, the overlooked. And that there's a lot of different folks and groups of people that fit into those categories. Now, so for us, it meant, okay, if, however we want to be about the injustices of this city, there's no way one church can do it all, nor should we even attempt to. So from the very beginning, the idea that Gene and I had, which we borrowed from the last church we were at, is it's better to partner. It's better to get behind or get around great organizations that are doing great work. And we're not the first church to ever do that, but I do think lots of times when churches do that, they have a list and criteria of, well, the organization can't support this and they can't be about this and they can't have anything where they have this type of, and for us, it was like, we are whittling down the list we are missing great organizations that have already proven themselves for decades if we're going to get hung up on those kinds of things. And that's not what I see in Jesus of going like, okay, well, you can be, with me, we can partner together, but you have to know, the Shema, you have to know the Torah, you have to know, you just don't see him rolling out his list of requirements.
He didn't have a bunch of conditions
about who
he was like, going to love and be with.
Exactly. And so for us, we've just been able to get around great partners, and we wanted to keep it really small, the list of our, like the collection of our partnerships, because we wanted to go deep and for the long haul with them. Mm-hmm. And I'd been around and worked for churches where it was like, there's 50 organizations they're partnered with, which is awesome, I guess, if you're in sort of a food court mentality. But what we wanted to do is have longevity and relationship so that folks could be in relationship with people who they might not otherwise interact with, the way the city is set up and the way that our preferences play out. Mm-hmm. So it's been really small. It's been like 3 or 4 organizations here in the city. We started with schools. We started with 2 schools that are right here in our neighborhood that are, 3 blocks away from one of the best, highest funded schools in the city of Chicago. And then a couple blocks away, you have some of the least funded schools in Chicago, which is no surprise. Lauren knows way more about that than I do. So it was schools. It was an organization that was doing a lot around homelessness and people who were, either home insecure. And then as we've partnered with them, they've grown into food insecure. And so the way that they're doing that and partnering with a specific community here on the west side of Chicago is beautiful. And then they evolved into after school care and anti-violence organization and program, which has really become the lion's share of what they do. And so all along the way, instead of us coming in and saying, we think you guys need to do this, we've just been like, how can we support? How can we help you? We can mobilize a significant amount of people, but it's at your pace and your direction. And I think that posturing of saying, we're here to serve versus, hey, here's what we need to do, has really, I think, been very, has formed us in many ways. And then the same is true with our global partnerships. We have 2. We're partnered with an organization called World Vision, and that started just because Gene and I have long history with them. And they have the largest team for the Chicago Marathon, and they suckered me into the first year of the church to running the marathon. And so every year we have a couple hundred people from our church that run with World Vision, but then that's branched out during the last year and a half during this most intense seasons, which seems like we're about to walk into again, of COVID-19, we were able to help this pretty significantly large global organization get really boots on the ground here in our community and here in the west side of Chicago. And we were able, because of their size and funding, and because of our ability to mobilize volunteers, albeit socially distanced, we were able to provide groceries for hundreds and hundreds of families every week throughout the pandemic. And to me, if they were, if we hadn't had this longevity in history, I don't know that we would have had the trust to be able to say to a pretty significantly large organization, hey, what if we could get really local during this time? Because you can't do any international trips right now. All that's canceled, but you have a community here that could greatly, be blessed by your organization and our relationship here. So, and then there's another organization that we're partnered with in El Salvador that is truly, we are completely learning from them, because they are all the way from the ground up. They don't allow anyone to come in and do anything until you have come and built relationship, till they partner with the local leaders and the work that they're doing through school and through education, community development. And so for us, again, it's how can we come in around, behind, support? That's, I think, is some of how we're doing some of the work we're doing. And then let me just close with this on that thought. All of that is great and good, and we can rally people and mobilize people towards that, but it does sort of, run its course or run aground if I'm not doing my work around this. And so, we can mobilize a bunch of volunteers that'll get on board with the way we do things, but if this is not working itself out in their life, there's going to eventually be a disconnect. We're going to come in with, whacked intentions. And so that has been now the new work over the last 2 years intensely at our church, is deeper work, class work, like group work, class work around, a lot of it around race, power, and privilege. And then for the last probably 4 or 5 years, what does it really truly mean to honor our brothers and sisters? What does it mean to serve with dignity, versus coming in, like you were talking about, Bethany, with just power and we're here to fix it. We've got money. We'll write you a check. Like, this is just not our vibe. We would rather be quiet and behind the scenes learning, and then out of that, some overflow that hopefully might bless these partners. So long answer to that question.
I guess I hear you saying, you removed a lot of structures and rules, and you just thought, if I get to the heart of what we're aiming for here and what we want to stand for, is to really love people and support people.
Shocker. Yeah.
And
which is easier said than done. It's so much easier to write a check. It's so much easier to send a group of people on a plane and all wearing the same t-shirt to Haiti. And that's great. There's a place for that, but it's so much harder to do the actual real love. I'm loving from the truth of who I am, my own inadequacies, my own deficiency, and I'm coming alongside you in the midst of yours, and really seeing each other as brother and sister. There's way more work there than, it's a lot easier to go the other route. I'll just say that. And we have a lot more work to do. I got a ton of work to do. I have a ton of work to do around that. So yeah.
It sounds like I like the idea, the commitment, the longevity, and the going deep. That's definitely, it's way more relational, right? In general.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about, so I have this vivid memory of sitting in Stacks with you, having breakfast. We would let me give Bethany this context. When I met Jared, I'm saying this with all this love for myself, I was a hot mess. He was my first learning partner. I had barely really tiptoed in CLG, and I was just totally different. And this man would take me to breakfast every week and pay for my breakfast almost every single time. And it's Jared, I could cry thinking about it. At that time in my life, that was so much grace, But then I have this other memory because it's like we always kind of sat in the same place, but that particular day we sat in a different place. So I like can remember where we're sitting. And we were talking about, you were talking about writing a book, which, you know, has now been written. And I was talking about like still working as a principal, having no idea how I could ever leave or pay for leaving. Like I want to be a spiritual life coach. And I think I might even talked about a podcast that day. Now that I think about it, you know? So there's just like this really beautiful thing that's come up for me multiple times of like, wow, look how much has happened since that conversation in both of our lives, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember race would come up a lot, or inequity, right? Because of just the work that I did. And like, I have no other knowing about this except my intuition from like our limited interactions and like social media. But it does seem like there's some significant depth to the work that you've done around that in the last like year or so. And I'm just wondering, like, is that feel true for you? And like, what growth or change have you seen in yourself?
Yeah. Thanks, Lauren. Yeah. And those times are very sacred to me. I mean, I don't drive by that. There's a restaurant, Bethany, that we would always go to, and I don't drive by there without thinking of Lauren every single time. Yeah, I would say that is true, Lauren. That does ring true. And I think some of it, look, I mean, I think a lot of it was, you know, feeling like, hey man, I'm down with all people. And I look at my friends, it's a diverse group, and, you know, I'm cool with this group and that. And I think like kind of like this surface level of sort of like, yeah, man, this is good. Not really like thinking there was
defending and proving.
Yeah, but never that aggressively, Bethany. Just more like,
very smartly.
Can't you tell? Can't you see? Like, I get it, man. I get it. And I think honestly, the last 5 years specifically under the, you know, I'm like totally honest, like under the Trump presidency, I think a lot of that was woken up for me, not because of him specifically, but because of sort of what that pulled back and revealed that was already there, that he has very little to do with, but that was already there and already true, that I had just sort of on the same level as I was like having this surface level of like, yeah, man, I'm good. I'm doing my work. And I think our country was kind of at that level too. Like, we had a Black president. Look at us. This is awesome. And I just think some things were pulled back for me and personally as I was watching. And then specifically when I saw those things pulled back for this group that I'm a part of, this family that I'm in called the church or Christianity or evangelicalism. And I'm seeing that it's not only the same stuff, it seems worse. And to me, that was sort of a slow, painful wake-up call of like, oh man, this is not right. We are not well. This is not okay. And, you know, rather than just going on Twitter or Instagram and just blasting off this person and that person, to me, it was like, I can only take responsibility for me. What work do I have to do? And I committed myself to just meeting under two guys from our church, two Black dudes from our church. One works in the mayor's office. One has been a pastor and leader here in the community. They're both a part of our church now. And I just said, like, can you help me? It's what Lauren and I do on CLG. Like, can you help hold a mirror up to me? What am I not seeing? What am I not getting? And they were incredibly generous. Even that is so much privilege to say, hey, Black people, can you help me see my whiteness? Like, but thankfully these guys are so generous. I was just texting with one of them right before we got on this call, you know, of just lovingly, you know, here I am, their pastor, but they are pastoring me. And then that began like, okay, I need to dive deeper. How come I don't know I don't know the work of James Baldwin? I don't know why, how come I've never read anything like that? How come? And I starting to realize the bubble that I'd grown up in, like, oh, because those things conceivably were intentionally kept from me, or I was irresponsible in seeking them out. Okay, well, I can make that change now. And so, yeah, Lauren, you're right. About 2-3 years ago began like a deep dive for me of exploring these things and then going, okay, as a person who's trying to live in the way of Jesus and help as best I can others to do so, how do I now integrate that and translate that into this work that I'm doing? And it's slower and lower, and there's still so much more. Like there's so much more work to do. But yeah, I would say, it was under the last presidency that for me, it was like, whoa, how did we get here? And then as I began to do my own work, it's like, oh, we've been here. I just didn't want to see it. I just didn't want to pay attention to it. I just wanted to keep riding the wave of it. Oh, okay. Well, then what can I do if I can't totally dismantle systems of racism and inequity and, all that? Well, I can start to do my work over here. I can do my work with our family. And then as I have the opportunity to do so, I can do that work with our church. And there's others that have done way more than me and do way more than me when it comes to leading that out in our church.
Because your church has gotten more diverse over time too. Is that right? Like
more diverse over time and significantly more diverse in the last year and a half while so when we started opening back up after COVID, it was like, oh, okay, this is awesome. And I think some of it is just some of maybe that first fruit of some of this work that our church has been doing, that Gene and I have been doing, that our leadership has been doing. Yeah, we restructured our board to never have it be majority white. We have been changing our staff structure, the things that lots of people are doing. But for whatever reason, 8-9 years in, we just like, oh yeah, we've held these ideals, but we've never really put our hand to the plow of making change to those things here in our own house. So that I think we're just now starting to see some of the fruit of that. So we'll see. I mean, each week it feels like a brand new church to me. So.
I'm having a moment of actual, real, true appreciation for the Trump presidency right now because so I like to stamp it when that feels true because, we can say, oh, I can have a whole list of my judgments and beliefs and the ways I make him something that I'm not.
Right. Projections.
And just like, how much change and shift in consciousness has been catalyzed by his presence, not being a person and doing stuff, like being a person doing things we don't believe in or doing stuff. It's being a mirror and just amplifying our ability to face.
Yeah.
I mean, even I credit the Trump presidency in being a major catalyst for me shifting my consciousness around my environmental work. For similar reasons, because I saw myself doing what he did, being a mirror for myself, which is persuade, use power, make the changes. Like a lot of environmental policies that were sort of hard won got rolled back in his presidency, like with the EPA and some different things that I'd been working on and towards and were important to me. And what I saw was, oh yeah, I am asserting my beliefs. I am like, and it was just such a mirror for me.
Doing the same
and
thing
it
in a different
opened
direction.
up. Yeah, it just opened up. And we had the most diverse, both by gender, age, and race, midterm elections of all time. In the midterm election after Trump was nominated. And so it's like, there really is, he was such a catalyst. It really assisted so many people in facing what our reality is and what we've created, I guess.
Yeah, I would
and
say
even
that resonates. That makes sense.
Yeah, and like Greta Thunberg and the climate marches. It's like none of that was going on before we started to roll back some of these policies. So many people have been woken up. Yeah, and in that way, I feel really grateful.
Yeah, and I want to connect a thought back earlier that you had, Bethany, and I think you're exactly right. I think that energy, and I did work with Lauren in group. I had to do a work around my initial anger because we were in a group right after some of those first things started to happen. And it is so easy for me to pivot to like that, you and this and that righteous sort of anger. And it is 100% about me being right. I'm right. You're wrong. Yeah. I get it. You don't. And I'm going to keep yelling at you until you change, because that's really how people change.
Be different. I will make you be different.
Yeah, I will make you, I'll ultimately make you be like me is what I was trying, I want. And so
different than you are, more like me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that to me is, I get some of that same energy in when you were talking about post-Christian or ex-evangelical or people who understandably so. I think I understand the impulse and I understand it to go, that was terrible. That was painful. You are a broken system. I mean, even just today, as I was riding back from a haircut, there's another report of another priest, the highest ranking priest to be found guilty of molestation. And, I'm like, oh my God, we're still here. We're still doing this. And it's so easy to point fingers versus going, okay, what is it that is different about me? And how can I begin to embody that and live that out versus just be, I don't want to be a part of that anymore. I'm not going to be, you got it wrong. You're, and then like you just did, I mean, you modeled, Bethany, to go, actually, how can I be grateful for this thing that may have genuinely caused pain in me, wounds, for whatever it may be, even a relationship, an institution, a president. How can I be grateful for the transformation that came about because of it? I would have never chosen it, but I'm different because of it. Can I be grateful for that? And I'm trying to get to that place, even with people who are, I would say distant cousins within the family that I'm a part of in this Christian, whatever we are, and I can look at and just go, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Are you absolutely kidding me? I mean, the insurrection was a boiling point for me of, because in the middle of this violence and vile hatred, there's crosses and Christian flags. And I just, to me, it was like, I was just wanting to explode with all this righteous anger and all this sort of stuff. But can I have an appreciation? There's language that Father Richard Rohr uses where he used to teach that we transcend and then include. And the idea was, I am not going to stay in that consciousness. I am not going to be bound by that. And then when I have elevated to a level of consciousness that is above that, then I can enfold them and welcome them and include them. And he said in the last 3 years, he's shifted his teaching to say, I include first, I welcome first, I acknowledge first. I don't endorse, I don't, support, but I have to say, this is my brother and this is my sister. And by
Richard Rohr is a gangster, by the way. I don't know if you,
he's
mystical gangster. Who, if you're listening to this, check him out.
I mean I can't say enough about him and the role he's played in my life. But that idea of, can I include and can I welcome and go, this version of America, which is the version of America, this is my brother and sister. This is our family. Okay. How then can I welcome and accept that? It doesn't mean I endorse it, and then not be bound by that. That subtle shift of, instead of going, I'm going to rise above it and then I'll be able to, out of my enlightenment, welcome these folks in, but saying, no, I'm going to start by loving. I'm going to start by welcoming and accepting. And then from there, I think real growth and transformation is possible. So I don't know. Those are a couple of thoughts.
It reminds me of, because we talk a lot on this podcast, and the tagline is called the paradox of healing. So this idea both that in some state of consciousness, in some way, we're all perfect and we don't need to be any different than we are. There's not a big problem and we're not all sick and we need healing. And that healing is compelling, and that and it's like holding both. Like, we need to heal and we don't need to. And I often think about how I'm going to engage. Like, there's a way where I could go do all my personal work forever and never go create any change in the world or go stand for anything or take any action.
Right.
And I could see how that doesn't work. Right. Like, because we're never going to be totally healed. We're never going to be totally perfect. We're never, and then there's this other way where we can drive into action with blind righteousness, with no self-awareness. And it reminds me of this quote. I heard Ram Dass say it, but I think he attributed it to Pema Chodron. But he said, we work on ourselves in order to help others, but also we help others in order to work on ourselves, which is just like, you do it at the same time. Like, they're actually in service of the same thing. Yeah,
they're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, you don't need to wait till you're fully baked to go and try to do something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think so, bringing it all the way back. I mean, I think that's some of, Lauren, maybe what's shifted in what's shifting in our church is what's shifting in us, and what's shifting in us is what's shifting in our church. And there is just this weird sort of symbiotic connection or relationship between some of that. And it's not just, when I say us, I don't just mean me and Jeannie. I mean the leaders of our church, the board, our board, that work is working its way out. And there's still lots and lots and lots of work to do.
Yeah, we in the organization that I work for, and I will even go back out. I went to this leadership training years ago at New York University, And he was like, gave us a list, like community, students, teachers, principal, all these things. He's like, and then concentric circles. And he's like, put these topics in the concentric circles. Like, where would you put the middle? Da, 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 da. And almost everybody put students at the middle. And his argument was like, no, you put yourself, you're at the middle. And then actually even like your staff, and then how your staff responds is actually then impacts your kids, and that impacts your family experience. And it was a huge shift for me. And then I had like a palpable experience of like having a leader change from a year to year, and just see the whole, like they didn't fire anyone, like the culture, everything shifted so quickly. It was just so palpable. That's when I was like, I want to be a leader. Like if that's how much power, and then later it was like, that's why I don't want to be a leader.
Yeah, right. I don't want all that responsibility.
I don't want all that responsibility.
Yeah.
But, and I would like, remember like in my staff every year would change, and I would look at them and I'd be like, oh my God, they look more like me this year. You know, they're like every year my evolution kept showing up. It's really strange. Yeah.
Yeah. How connected it is.
Well,
go ahead. I have a question.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if this is really what they were standing for, but how I experienced, my specific denomination and the church I grew up in, and like the camps and schools I went to when I was a kid. The philosophy was, we are broken. We are inherently broken, and we need this. We need to do this in order to be whole again. And, we see ourselves doing that, like these conditional things. It's just through all of our lives. I think it's probably innate. Like it's just an innate way that we relate to the world.
That's why there's a diet industry. I mean, that's why there's gym memberships. It's like, I'm incomplete. I need this thing to complete me.
So I guess my question is, so like I said, our whole podcast is around that paradox of healing. What's it like to hold that you don't need to do anything and you don't need to be different than you are, and like holding basically love consciousness, which is just a pure state of acceptance, in the structure of a church. And I heard you say not very religious, but like, when I think about Jesus, he wasn't waiting for people to do X, Y, Z before he was going to love them and accept them. Right. So how are you embodying that, and how do you experience the shift of people's consciousness around, what you need to do? Like, do you need to repent? Like, are we holding people as broken, or are we holding people as perfect? What's your experience of how holding a community as a church in that whole thing?
That's a great question. Not surprisingly, it does so much of what has shaped and formed. Well, I've been shaped and formed by several things. Yeah, I grew up kind of in that tradition of, there's an old book from, oh gosh, I don't even want to guess when, but it's called Sinners in the Hand of an Angry God. Boy, if that doesn't say everything about like, sign me up for that. Like, that sounds exciting. It's like, good Lord. That was our consciousness. Like, that was it. Like, you are, and I get it. Like, we are so committed to in and out, that to dualism, to, broken, whole, saved, unsaved. We're just so committed to that way of viewing things. When I say we, I mean everybody. Like, we are just innately wired to that. That's our default. It's how again, Richard Rohr talks about the two halves of life, and he uses the metaphor of a container. You need the container in the first half of life. You need you to find your sort of place. You have to go, oh, I'm not that. Oh, I am like that. Oh, I don't think about things that way. Oh, I do things. It helps you find your place, and then you get to a place where those things are no longer of service to you, and to where you can lovingly say, rather than smashing the container, I no longer need to be bound by this, but I can hold it rather than it holding me. And so I think it's understandable to me for at a certain level of consciousness, even if you were to do any work around spiral dynamics, which every time I try and read more around it, I get more confused. But those base levels of consciousness do need sort of a, how, in, out, us, them, that's how tribe, that's how identity.
And the universe learns through contrast. I mean, that is
that is night,
that
day.
is a huge,
land, water. Yeah, we have all of these things to go, oh yeah, okay. So I don't, it doesn't mean to say that those things don't exist. It just means that not everything is bound by that. And just like you could say land, water, well, yeah, but water is not just water. You can have water in all these different forms. Land can come in all these different forms. So obviously there's a multiplicity of expressions of even those differences. But I think, for going all the way back to the question, do I see myself as a sinner in the hand of an angry God? No, that just, to me, that is a complete miss of what Jesus's teachings were all about. That his message was, you're loved, you are loved. You are loved, you are loved, you are loved. And at the same time, he said to folks, follow me, follow me, follow me. So, follow in this way. There is a, follow this way. And, that is a difference. I mean, some people go, well, that sounds really exclusive. And I get that. That makes a ton of sense to me. I would contend his way is so inclusive, but that's another conversation maybe for another day. So for me, it's no, you already are loved. I think there's a big, I don't know how Bible nerdy you want me to get, but this is I've had to do a lot of healing work around this, because I don't think anyone with malicious intent tried to do this for me, but I was raised in that you're a sinner, you are incomplete, you need to be saved. And, yes, God loves you, but he kind of has to, but he really loves people who say yes to him. So I was kind of raised in that culture. And so I get it. I think the real shift is a misunderstanding of the first story of the Bible. And I don't know how much you want me to go into this. I'll try.
I literally went to seminary, so you're among friends here.
Okay. So to me, there are folks who only want to read the Bible from Genesis 3 on. And really, they don't even want to read the Gospels. They just want to read the Old Testament because that makes sense. In, out, us, them, warring tribes, conquering, taking, that kind of thing. And what they miss is the first 2 chapters of the Bible, of this first story of the Bible, is God repeatedly, out of an abundance of love, creating. That love cannot help but create. That's why we're all here. At some point, 2 people loved each other enough to create us, and that's why we're all here. And so out of that abundance of love, there is creation. And every moment of that, the phrase is, it was good, and it was good. God said, it is good, it is good, it is good, it is good. And what happens in that goodness is that is really our original state, is, again, Rohr calls it original goodness. And what we obsess on is what happens in Genesis 3, which is where there is this shift in the story, where there is this choice other than what God had set up. And that's where people want to camp out and say, no, it's about original sin. We are born sinners. It's original sin. And they completely miss where the story starts and what Jesus came to bring the story back to. He came to pick the needle of the record up and go, no, we're here. We're not there. We're here. And put it back onto original goodness, that you are loved, that you are loved, that you are loved. And whether you ever love God, or whether you ever get it all right, or whether you're even a good person, you are loved. And so for me, it's like, well, that's awesome and amazing. And there's more than just being loved, that there's a way of living into love. There's a way of loving others. That to me is where Jesus comes in. And the way of Jesus comes in is, how do I take this love that is innately, inherently in me, and is no more in you than it is in me, no less in me than it is in you. It is for every single person, right? How do I then take that love, and then how do I begin to love myself and love others? Love myself and love others. How do I, as Jesus said when he summed it all up, how do I love God with my whole self? And this is, to me, it's so much is packed up in this. When he said, love God with your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. That is the whole self. That's not just with knowing some verses to yell at people on Instagram comments. That's not just loving God with my body, with the actions I do. He says body, mind, soul, heart, strength, all of it. and love others as you love yourself. To me, that's everything. So I am loved. I don't have to earn that. I don't have to prove that. I don't have to jump through hoops for that. And I want to now then live in that love and love God with my whole self and love others as I'm loving myself. That to me is where the ball game is at. And, I think it to me, there's so much more to play with there than just you're bad and then you're good. And everyone else who hasn't done what you did, they're bad. And so we either hate them or we try and convince them to be good like us. That's just a small game to me. So,
well, I like what Lauren points to, which is it really helps us learn to separate things out, because like going to my upbringing and my youth, that's what it was. It was like, it was this very binary good, bad, and it created all these deltas and differences and things that I was noticing and putting attention on and letting all of the reactivity and all of the pressure and the actually often clean anger that I could feel, right? And then I ditched the whole thing and was like, well, I'm going to throw this whole thing away because these parts of it aren't working for me. And then, latched onto new and different structures and like consciousness as a structure and these other practices. And where it ended up was this, in the last couple of years is more of this place of embodying love consciousness. And when I basically ended up back where I started, and it was me and how just my level of awareness and my consciousness that I had that experience in my church experience. That's just where I was at and what was happening for me. And the more that I'm like, you're doing it wrong. It's just, can you eat those projections?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
I'm just doing the same thing. And now I don't find myself very reactive in the way that I was about a lot of, so I'm like, oh yeah, Jesus. Yes. Like that's the same deal that I'm going for with all, just with these other words and these other structure and these other orientation. And the only thing that's changed is me and how I relate to things and like
I
what
really
level
relate
of
to that.
Yeah.
It's like I'm coming back to Jesus. Like, I like actually picked up the Bible at my mom's house, and I'm like, oh yeah, this actually makes a lot of sense. This really resonates. Like,
isn't it? Go ahead, Lauren.
Well, I'm just saying, like, and there's language in there, and like, but because of the context and personal experience, and there's all these things that like I'm adding and I'm bringing to the reading. And I guess like before it was like somebody was like just telling me who Jesus was, right?
Yes.
And I was just like, okay, that's who Jesus is, and like that means this, and and it's a whole different thing to come to it and be like the way I would read about Richard Rohr, the way I would read about Buddha, or the way I would read about any like higher consciousness being that I believe could have existed, or however you want to look at it. Like, and I'm like, damn, he really, I really get him now.
Yeah. And I think that's that, for me, that is the thing is I don't know how, am I innately perfectly loved? Yes. Do I innately perfectly know how to live that out? No, I categorically do not. Ask anyone who's in a relationship with me. They will tell you he does not have that figured out. So for me, it's that humility of saying, I need a teacher. I want a teacher. And to me, that is who Jesus is. And he's more than that. I would use the language of savior, but not in that sense of that old paradigm of you're bad and this is the only way to get good. I think he is constantly saving me from myself, from my ego, from my, there's a constant work that's happening in me. It's not a one-time thing. It's not a like, we'll just sign this line or say this yes, and then you're good to go. It's like, no. Every day I feel like, oh, this is saving me. This is changing me. This is redirecting me. And so to me, it then gives whole new meaning to things like the cross and all these things that were around, that were rooted in guilt and shame, and now have this liberation of like, oh my gosh, look at the lengths to which he was willing to lead and to, model these things that I'm fumbling and stumbling to try and get right 5 minutes a day. So,
well, this is kind of an out there thought, and I'm just but I've had a couple of situations where I was in medicine journeys with people channeling Christ consciousness. Like almost like it's a dimension of reality that you can tap into. And so it's just like, for me in my belief system right now, it's very hard for me to like believe that this man who died and rose again, like, and that he's special and somehow different than all these other people. Like I struggle with that piece. However, I can believe that aliens are downloading information to,
Right.
you know, I can, you know, it's like when I really look at it objectively.
She called herself out.
Right. When I look at it objectively,
I've heard the alien
I'm
download.
Like,
I love it.
But there was just something about like, oh, like, what if Christ consciousness and this whole story and all of this is like channeled from this like other dimension of reality that is living and breathing? Because people do talk about Jesus in a way that he feels so real to them.
Yeah. Well, Lauren, I think you are. This is you hit the nail on the head of what has been some of my work over the last 2 years specifically. And I don't know if I've mentioned Father Richard Rohr yet in this podcast, but just for those who maybe have missed the 97 other times I mentioned it, he wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Universal Christ. And for people who are sort of in that paradigm of, you know, anytime someone brings something that doesn't fit within the box, they throw them out and feed them to the wolves. You know, it really did piss a lot of people off. And to me, it was like, yes, this is what I've been feeling, but I haven't had language for. And it's, there's so much to unpack. So I'm gonna say the name of the book again, if anyone's interested, Universal Christ by Richard Rohr, because he delineates between two things that we use synonymously, and that's Jesus and the Christ. And when I saw him unpack this, and then I went back to all those things in the Bible, I'm like, okay, I've read this 100 times. I assumed it meant this. There is a difference. Jesus is this person that the Christ embodied. But when you read stuff, and a lot of Paul's writing, when you read,
I knew it.
Yeah, it's like, no, you were on it. You were just the first one to get there through a journey.
Channeling that shit the whole time.
Yeah, he's been waiting for you this whole time.
Embodied by aliens.
Yeah, that's right. He was waiting for you to get through the alien download so he could give you this. No, but there is a difference, because Paul specifically in the book of Colossians chapter 1 does this beautiful, it's a poem. It's really considered one of the first poems of the church. And he says over and over again, Christ is in all things, through all things, by Christ, all things are made, held together, reconciled by, and he keeps using Christ, Christ, Christ over and over again. And I think that is important to delineate that there is this Christ that is bigger than any paradigm, any body, any physicality. It is this divine, the essence of divine love, fully, completely. And the Christ was in Jesus, like came as a person, Jesus. And so you had this oneness of the physical and the spiritual, of Christ and of us. And so to me, even understanding, delineating, it doesn't diminish Jesus at all in any way. To me, what it is like, oh, I get it. There are specific times where he even he's referenced to as the Christ. And that's different than just Jesus, his name. And I agree with you, Lauren. I think it has been, he is not the right word, but the Christ has been revealed and is revealed in everything. Everything, Bethany, you care about this world and this planet, every star that we could possibly, like the furthest star, I was just reading an article that back in December, they found what they believe to be the furthest star that we've ever seen before. It's already revealing, like the Christ is already in that and through that and by that and all the prepositions. And to me, that is like, oh my gosh, that is so much bigger than an in and out story to me, so I don't know if that resonates with what you're saying there.
Well, I'm appreciating your humility around where you're at and what you know, what you don't know, and what, where you have mastery and where you don't, because I think the thing in me that would be in church and have someone be like, I know what you should do. I have the answers. I'm up like that energy, which we feel it all over the spectrum now, right? We feel it in politics. We feel it when we
Instagram
are othering.
Influencers. Yeah.
All of it, we can feel the bullshit. And it's like, so I hear you. It's one of the things Laura and I talk about, the capacity for uncertainty and to be brave enough to say, I don't know. I don't know. This is,
as of today, this is where I'm at. This is the furthest I've ever gotten. So,
and that is the mind craves certainty. And there's a certain way where we want someone to just say, no, I know what's going on here. And here's what you got to do. And it's going to be okay.
Totally.
And it's this really it's because we're so scared that we want to hear that and believe it. And we just go, okay, I'll just do that because we don't want to think about what it actually feels like to not know. So I was just appreciating, more and more pockets of life, owning, I don't know.
Yeah,
here's where I'm at.
Here's where I'm at today. Yeah, exactly.
Because it makes all of us not knowing and all of our uncertainty more okay. It's mirroring back, like it's okay to not know everything. And I think that's transformational.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, what's interesting, like, I guess this would be a paradox. Like when you say that, when I feel into,
do we have to take a shot every time the word paradox? Or
I wish that was happening.
Every episode.
No, starting next time. It's like, I actually trust what Jarrett knows more because, like, when I feel into you, because there's been an experience of constant learning and emerging. Like, I can feel it. I can feel how, like, you came to this awareness and then you were like, there was tension and confusion and you explored and you came to a new one. And then that brought you here and that brought you here. And that's, like, I've been taught that that's the difference between a belief and a knowing, right? A knowing is because you've explored it and it's become experiential, and knowings don't always last forever. New awarenesses bring new knowings, but I don't know, like, it's just a paradox. Like, there's a lot of uncertainty and probably more in your cells of what is true than people who have not been willing to step into that uncertainty or take those kinds of risks to really explore for themselves.
Well, that came up on our last, we had Diana Chapman on, and she was talking about her knowing and how she would just trust her own knowing no matter what. And then we asked her, what's true? She was like, nothing. And so she's holding both. She's like, all I know is that I don't know. Nothing. Like, so she's holding her instinctual knowings and just like where she's at and what's coming through her and where, like, what's there in the moment, while holding that she doesn't feel right about any of it, and that she can see how the opposite of each one of those knowings has some truth and that kind of a thing. I think and our ability to be able to hold paradox and to hold two things that seem in contradiction as true at the same time, that is the edge. And I feel like that's what all the really loud pressures that are happening now are inviting us into some of that. These expanded ways to hold knowing and truth.
I think for me, just I can only speak for me and my experiences, that can be as, if not more, intimidating or fearful, that squishiness, to me, I genuinely believe there's a stuff of faith, for a word from my side over here, is that is what it is it's like, I don't know, that is it's so much more comforting to just be told and to just, do and play along. And so, to me, I think it's just far more formative and transformative to be like, this is as much as I can know today. And I do have this sense. And I would add, from kind of my experience, that I believe that when we talk about the Christ a second ago, I believe that Christ is in me. It's not out there, in me. It's in me. If it's in everything, then it's in me. And how can I lean into that and have a knowing beyond even my own experience or confidence or assuredness or whatever certainty it may be. So there's some comfort in that, like, that, but it also is terrifying at times. It's incredibly terrifying. I'd much rather be told what to do.
Well, I know we're kind of coming in for a landing. I say that every time.
That's the 30 minutes. That's 30 more minutes. Is that what that means?
About 25. Yeah. We're like, okay. It's really like warning, Bethany, don't start a big topic that's going to take an hour. I'm just thinking about, like, from humility, like if we were to just play with what you have learned about healing and what you're starting to become aware of around collective healing, like what's true for you today?
That's that's a big question. It's a great question. Well, I'll just go with what is coming right now. I think, I appreciate what you said, Bethany, like everything is perfect and there are things that need to be, there is healing, and that brings more. I think that healing brings more life. It's like, we're in the process of moving right now, and we're renovating an old house because my wife has a renovation addiction. And so we're renovating this old house, and we had to trim off some trees. We had to take out some trees. And what's so fun is Lola and Nathan are doing it. Lauren, they're doing all of our landscaping with us. So it's so fun to be with Lola and Nathan. And there is that idea of there's this elm that we have that looked like it had some sick branches. And so we had to cut off some branches so that the whole could be saved. And there are, so it's like, I could look at that tree and go, well, it's perfect as it is. And also know that if it continues this way, it will die and maybe fall into the house. So there is some things that need to be healed. There are some things that need to be tended to in that. And it isn't pretty at times, and it's painful even at times. And so I think I'm looking at myself and going, okay, I want to say that I'm looking at myself and saying, where are the places that need healing? Where are the places that are good and fine and whole and all those things? And also, I wonder what else might be possible if I were to give healing attention to those things. So part of the way that I've done that without knowing or without certainly any deep spiritual intentionality is, has been a therapy journey for me. That's been a long part of my journey for many years. And a big shift for me was joining the group with Lauren and doing group work for the last 5 years. And that's a part that has been healing for me. And I remember, it was very healing for me to come into the group. And I don't even know if Lauren would remember this. I think she fell asleep in the first group or took a nap in the middle of the first group. I can't remember. No, we were together. But I think I said in the very first group, hey, I'm a pastor and this is what I want you to know about me. And I said something like, I'm not here to be any of your pastors. I do
remember that actually.
It opened up a shitstorm immediately happened in that group, which was awesome because it was like one of the first things of work that we did together, And so for me, I'm coming in saying, I care for people and I carry spiritual burdens with people. And I don't want to do that here. I want this group to be for me. The audacity, right? The arrogance to assume that anyone was waiting for me to show up to do that for them. And to have that exposed in me and people really lovingly kind of push into that and go after that was really painful, at first for me and scary for me and yet so healing for me to go, oh my gosh, where else is that showing up in me? I wonder what it's like to be on the other side of me in friendship. Do people think I think that I have to be their pastor, to be their friend, or that I have some other agenda going on? And so for me, it's a lot of it has been of my healing work has been around detaching from who I am. And this is going to sound so deep and profound. I'm sure no one's ever said these words, but detaching who I am and then from what I bring to the world. And I know that sounds so like duh, but it really, when it's something as intimate as faith and it's something as meaningful as practice or whatever it may be for people, things of the spirit, things, like that. And that's the work you're bringing into the world. For whatever reason, I've created the story that is harder to detach from because, it's like, someone DM'd me yesterday and was like, my marriage is falling apart and I'm drinking again. And this is like in a DM and I don't know that I even know this guy. And he's like, I just want to know if there's any way you can help. And I'm like, man, okay, I was about to post another Kanye post, but all right, okay, what can I do about this? Because it gets so innately wrapped up, like I am a pastor, I am a whatever it is. And so I think right now I would say I can only speak to that. Some of the work that I'm doing, I'm back in therapy again. Specifically, Lauren and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago on a call. I think I went through this pretty significant season of loss and grief, as I know Lauren has. We both were sharing with each other what it means to lose our fathers and kind of where we're at in that grief process. And I just had hit such a wall of trying to manage and mitigate my grief. I knew enough to know that I wasn't going to stuff it down. I wasn't going to ignore it. I wasn't going to do any of those things, but I just did not give myself space I have not given myself space to grieve the loss of my brother and my father back to back this last year. And so I felt myself hitting that wall. Things that were fairly easy were really hard. and things that I could, kind of do fairly without thinking, I could not accomplish. And so a lot of my healing work right now is around creating space for grief. And I'm about to, this starts this week. We take a break every summer as a family for very generously. Our church gives us a month off every summer to really stop and detach and rest. And I'm grateful that I'll be able to, at least through my schedule and my work, be able to detach from the work of what I do to create some intentional space to really grieve, and to then, my hope is to be able to integrate that grief into my life and to continue to give myself room to grieve on a regular basis. That was something my therapist said this last week, was like, I think what you're doing is good. I think it's so helpful. And what would it look like for you to create regular space to grieve? There's so much that we hold, and there's so much to grieve. Mm-hmm. And he's like, he goes, I bet if you set aside time every week, you'd never not have something to grieve every week.
Yeah.
And that to me sounds right and good, and doesn't sound fun, but it sounds like, oh, that actually sounds more interesting to me. So part of my healing work right now is integrating this loss and this grief, and giving myself some space for that, and bringing some people in to support me in that. That's kind of what it looks like right now in this season. And as crazy as it sounds, I'm looking forward to it. I'm genuinely looking forward to creating some of that space and getting some support around that. So
that really does relate over here, I guess. I haven't articulated it that way, but I can't remember if I told you this when we talked, but basically, like, the universe rerouted me to live with my mom for the last 4 months. Right. And I've really been isolated. Like, last weekend was the first weekend I saw people, because I went to Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the heartbreak and the waves have been like, there's some days where it feels bigger than my body, like that my body can't even hold it. And I've really been like, I am grieving so many things. Yeah. And so many things over the course of my life that I haven't. It's almost like this huge purge or detox of the grief that I hold in my body.
Yeah. And what we were talking about, Lauren, I don't know if you remember, but I think it was an aha for me, it wasn't just the things that I'm grieving. It's the compoundedness itself is a thing to pay attention to. It's not just that there are things to grieve. It's that it felt like, at least this last year, so much happened so deeply, and things were lost at a deep level, but in a very short amount of time. And even that compoundedness itself is a thing that I want to contend with and go, okay, what does that mean? And I could talk a lot about that, but I would be kind of getting past the tips of my skis, because this is, I think, the work that I'm being invited into right now.
I think you're on
Bethany,
mute.
We lost you. How did you go on mute in the middle of
I
this?
went on mute somehow. I've been doing all this somatic experience therapy work. And so I've been receiving it with my therapist for a year and a half or so. And as a type 8, to just sit and feel feelings all the time and get really tender, it's really transformed my nervous system.
She also has a strong 7. Jarrett's a 7.
Strong 7 ring.
It's debatable over here.
Yeah. She doesn't believe it.
Could go anyway.
So I've been feeling my grief. I think I've been feeling through grief. And even I'm learning SE now, because I have SE clients that I support them with SE, and some of them we get on Zoom and we don't even say anything, and they just start to cry because we've created a safety for feeling and for grieving, and their body knows, okay, like, it's time to grieve now, and it just comes immediately. Yeah. I'm thinking of one person in particular, but this whole paradox that we're talking about, I believe that all of the room to grieve, there's 2 things. One, I think it helps us build that capacity for holding the paradox. Because if I go through the 15 commitments and try to figure out where am I, triggered in CLG language, like, where am I not available to be present? It's around like the environmental work that I do. It's like I'm not willing, or I haven't yet built the capacity to really feel through all my feelings, how I feel about a dying planet. Yeah. And so I think it helps us build that capacity to hold the paradox. My friend Steve always reminds me of this quote, and I went on mute because I was finding it. But it's Shunryu Suzuki, and he says, each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement. And so it's holding one of those paradoxes. That really is the paradox of healing. Like, you're perfect and you could do a little work.
Yeah,
you can change a couple things. There's some places to grow. There's some new ways to be. And it's holding both of those. And I think freeing our systems to hold all that grief and be with it helps us hold those paradoxes and holding multiple truths as true all at the same time. Yeah. And then there's another thing that Deb told me about. I'm trying to see if I can find the name of the guy. I think it's a Native American guy who writes on grief. And he talks about that grief for them isn't like a problem. It's like a indicator of how much love you have, because you wouldn't, like, they're indelibly tied together how much your capacity for love is, and then therefore in relationship to loss, how much grief you would be experiencing. It just points to your depth of love. And so not
I've always heard, like,
grief.
I've heard, like, grief is the price you pay for love.
Well, and let's all swap quotes, but this is a deep spiritual leader from the show, my mic just fell, from the show WandaVision. So a deep place of spiritual learning, and the synthezoid robot called the Vision. So this is really a beautiful setup for a beautiful quote. But in this season of television, I mean, it hit me so hard. I started bawling in front of my kids because it was in the midst of trying to integrate this grief. But this quote from this show, this Marvel superhero show, was, "What is grief if not love persevering?" And I just like, that's it. This is what that love looks like now, in the loss or the absence of that thing or that person that's no longer available to me. Grief is what love looks like as it perseveres. And I mean, it's, so to me, it's like, I don't know if anyone gets excited about grief, but to me, I feel an openness and a welcoming of maybe a new way, not to think of grief as a season or as a thing, but as part of my way, part of my transformation.
Part of loving.
Yeah, part of loving. Exactly. Yeah, that it's
part
like
of love consciousness.
And
I love that we landed here, because like, this has been coming up as a theme, and I'm resistant to it, but that grief is required for healing the collective, because when we can't access our grief or like that the planet is getting destroyed, or that Black bodies are being killed, or like when we can't access it, like something is blocked in our ability to heal it and be available. And that this like message that we have been pretty unavailable to grieve. And as a result can destroy things or lose things, right, without much consequence, because we're not allowing the heartbreak of it.
I wonder what might be on the other side of a rhythm of grief, and of, it's not, again, to me, I keep using this word, and Lauren, you and I talk about this. I don't know why I keep coming back to integrating, because to me, it's not about learning to let go. It's about learning to welcome this current state of this, of my dad, of my brother. Like, how can I welcome that in as it is right now, versus just like, you got to learn to let it go, and let God, it's like, no, I want to hold this in a way that actually is in keeping with love. It is in keeping with life, versus just like, okay, I was sad for a month and now I'm over it. Cause that's, I think,
well, it's like death and rebirth. They're the cycles, I wonder if the earth kind of grieves when winter comes and some of the life dies. I wonder if, and every time has to integrate a new version, a new way of being. And part of that is accepting that the old way of being, but that's happening all the time. And I think I've heard people make arguments for like the way that we birth babies, because it's become so sterilized and so clinical. And then the way we handle death, that we have really disconnected from almost like try to control, control the cycles and control that integration process, and probably control for heartbreak, right? To some extent.
Mitigate heartbreak. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're making me think the heartbreak is what supports the integration. Because for me, even energetically, my heart center is kind of like my access point to everything else. So if I am holding it, the energy is stuck. It's not moving, and then it can't integrate.
Yeah.
Well, for more on grief, I found it. Thank you, Dead Cats. It's Martin Prechel, Prechdel, and it's Grief and Praise. And you can find it on like YouTube, and he has a book called The Smell of Rain on Dust, Grief and Praise. And it's a masterwork on the relationship between grief and love.
Yep, there it is. Awesome. That's beautiful. Thank you. Boom.
Yeah, I mean, this is what always happens. It's like, oh, what did the podcast teach us today about healing the collective that we, and that's, and it's like literally started pouring rain, right? Like as we were just now, like I could just feel it. It's like, just accept the grief.
No, that's God punishing Florida. You just need to accept it. You've been too much Florida today. So he's got to just purge that. So
well, I'm like, since we're almost at time, I'm like resisting an astrology digression, but that's the same, all the seasons and the flow. Like I'm a Scorpio rising, and in Scorpio season, that's when we move into fall and death and decay happen, and we like embrace it. And that's all this like intensity of Scorpios. And it's like, that's what it's pointing to. It's pointing to more comfort with the intensity and the resulting grief around loss, but trusting it. And it's cyclical, and it's in its own time, and it's reliable, and it's part of life, and not something to be avoided.
Love it. Oh, good
stuff. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. This is so fun. I'm really grateful. I told you my kids would be outside this window any minute, so there they are. Yes. I'm really grateful, Bethany, for you, and I've watched some of the videos, and so I've only had sort of a distance of being in your presence. So I'm really grateful to be with you, and the work that I can tell you do, and for yourself, and as that overflows into the lives of others. I'm very, very grateful for that. And for we didn't even talk about how my views of the world have changed and what stewardship of the planet means, and how it's one of the most spiritual. And I would say it's, for those of the Christian faith, I mean, we could set up another pod for me to go off if you'd like, about how the people who should be caring most for the planet are people who claim to follow Jesus. But that's for another time. But I'm very grateful for your passion and for the work that you bring into the world. And obviously Lauren knows, she's my sister. I love her so much and miss her so much. And sad when she comes to Chicago and we don't get to see each other. I get bummed when we don't get to see each other, but love Lauren deeply and dearly, and am always grateful for the role that you played and play in my life. I don't know if I have a relationship like the one I have with you, so I'm very grateful for you.
Thank you, Jared. It's so good to just be in your presence and your aura and your energy. And I think that we like met at such a special growth time. And it's really, it's kind of like you have your friends from high school or middle school, and they're the only ones who know you during that time. Like Jared holds really this time and space. Like,
well, I'm noticing a deep appreciation. I've been in it, and aware of it ever since Lauren said that you were supporting her in this moment. Like you were giving her love and support with just breakfast and consistency and open-heartedness at this specific time in her life. And I didn't know her in this life then, but I guess I want to say thank you for loving my friend. And I imagine that that's how you show up with your congregation, your church. Like, thank you for loving the people that are around you. I think it's clearly transformational.
Thanks. Except the haters. I don't have any love for them. So
yeah, fuck those guys.
That's right. They're out. Thank you very much. Thanks for making this time. And I've been looking forward to it since it's been on my calendar for a while now. It's been so fun to be ready and to be present with us. I
think we booked it in like February.
Yeah, no, it was a different world when we booked it. So I'm grateful for it.
Thanks for being with us, Jarrett.
Bye, everybody.
Totally.
Bye. Love you.
Hey everybody, if you've got any feedback for us, we welcome it, or ideas about future guests, email us at healingcollectivepod@gmail.com. Our website is thehealingcollectivepodcast.com. We are at Healing Podcast on Twitter, and we are at Healing Collective Podcast on Instagram. Special thanks to Monda Creative, who edits all of our podcasts, and Two Tall Women Productions, who produce. Thank you.